Right, so let's start with a keynote speech, which will talk about the basics for the first semester, so to speak. And Mr. Loschwitz is director of the BDE. People say Bundesverband der Entsorgungswasser Kreislaufwirtschaft, which would mean Federal Association of German Waste Management, Water Management and Circular Economy Issues. So the last two letters in the abbreviations are missing. Now he read law and was in Cologne, and he's always been scientifically interested. So, Mr. Loschwitz, you will now tell us something about the National Circular Economy Strategy. Thank you very much, Mr. Fahlstich. Hello, everyone. I'm very glad to be here and that you're actually interested in this specific subject, although you're in such an interesting trade show. Right, maybe I can tell you a few things on the BDE. We renamed ourselves. We were called BDE, Federal Association of German Waste Management, Water Management and Water Resources. And then at the IFA in Munich, at that trade show, we renamed ourselves into Circular Economy Association, because we as an association are also moving forward. Transformation doesn't only concern everyone else, but you have to look at your own programs and devices and whatever. So we not only changed our name, but we also opened our mindset to other members. We've got Rubis with us, who are not only responsible for recycling, but for copper, but also work with recyclables, or Werner and Merz are also members. Those are the ones with the frog that you know when you're shopping at the supermarket. They sell cosmetics and cleaning products who use a lot of recyclate and designed for recycling. So when it comes to disposal or recycling, they don't have that much to do with that, but with the circular economy. So we as BDE tried to move forward and not only changed our name, but tried to fill this with life, this whole concept of circular economy. We said we can't just stay in the linear world, but we need to move away from consuming and to recycling. So we're not only talking about consumers, but of users and recyclers. So this mindset really needs to be rethought, which is why I'd like to start with a higher altitude, so to speak, just so that you know what this is all about. It's always about climate protection and the sustainability development goals, which were adopted in 2015. I thought I'd just show you, because once again in New York, the climate conferences are being organized, and Mr. Schulz and others went there to report on what Germany has done. But in connection to the 17 SDGs, the Paris Agreement will have to be checked. This was also in 2015, where the objective was 1.5 degrees global warming, but not to get to the 2 degrees. I think the 1.5 degrees are a bit shaky already, whether we'll get there, but at least the 2-degree objective is something that we're trying to achieve still. And the COPs, the climate summits, they always sort of, more or less happen. But if you look at the decisions of Sharm el-Sheikh last year and what is expected from Dubai, things are beginning to get more concrete. If you look at the website of COP27, this was in Sharm el-Sheikh, and enter circular economy there, then you see that you get more than 1,000 hits. This just shows the importance in connection with climate protection. The Green Deal by Ursula Leyen makes it quite clear, this was said by Mr. Timmermans, that carbon neutrality as an objective of a carbon-neutral continent, Europe, in 2050 will not be achieved if the circular economy tools wouldn't be used parallelly. I brought along a chart by Systemic and Akatech. This shows you quite clearly the pillars in blue. That's the scenario without circular economy, where you can see that carbon neutrality in 2050 will not be reached. And if you look at instruments of carbon neutrality, then you almost get there, let's say. But there are also negative emissions, as you can see. And Germany wanted to be carbon neutral, wants to be carbon neutral by 2045. So the speed is going to get even faster. So circular economy is the player, and for circular economy, recycling is also going to be a top priority topic. At a trade show such as this one, I think it's really a major opportunity. This is why I brought this graph with me. Recycled in the EU, it says, I think the symbol really demonstrates something, because it also demonstrates recognition, and you always have to think about what the competitors of the recyclates are. It's the fresh raw materials. Professor Faulstich in his introduction mentioned this already. You always think, well, everything is absolutely pure in its category. But the truth is that disposal usually takes part somewhere in the emerging markets and leads to environmental pollution. And you can assume that the products that compete with recyclates have a difficult background and often don't have these honest prices. They don't have this CO2 backpack, and it doesn't sort of reflect their true heritage. So you always need to keep that in mind when it comes to recyclates that are highly regulated and that are recycled very well by our companies. Depending on the sourcing of primary raw materials, we have the situation that the demands go far beyond what's available in terms of raw materials. You've seen this graph, I'm sure, already, where you see the demands extrapolated all over the world, the whole Earth's population. If the entire Earth's population were living as the United States, we would need 5 Earths. And if you look at Germany, you'd need 3 Earths. And if you look at the current situation, emerging markets and development countries have lower consumptions. We've reached a situation where currently we have the demand that would require 2 planets. So we are living beyond our means, and you could always say, oh, well, it doesn't concern me. That's probably true. The generation that's sitting here today will probably deal with primary resources. But at some stage, things are finite, and your children or grandchildren will be affected. And you had the situation of COVID, where the supply chains just collapsed, and where you saw how vulnerable raw material supply is already in Europe, although the raw materials are still available. And it became even more evident since the war in Ukraine, since the beginning of last year. And the President of the Commission, Ms. von der Leyen, said in 2023, in the beginning, in connection with Ukraine, that raw material supply is essential in order to make transformation to a sustainable economy possible at all. But even if you didn't want to have transformation, industry needs raw materials, needs transformation. So recycling is always at the focus of attention. The previous governments have said time and again, well, we've got domestic raw materials, imports and recycling raw materials. But the truth is, recycling raw materials weren't always at the focus of people's attention. Things have shifted here. The importance of recycling raw materials as strategic raw materials is now really in the foreground of attention. At the BDI, there's a committee in the current legislative period where it presides a member company of ours, a company which wouldn't have existed in the past, and it shows that in this industrial family, recycling is really something that people focus very much on. This is pushed forward by more or less anybody and everyone. Taxonomy is one area, for instance, that bonds are being issued, green bonds, to ensure that green investments are made into these areas. Sustainable financing is another buzzword. And at the moment, I think we don't have lack of money, but there are not enough areas in which to invest. But some things are changing here. If you look at the startups, the Tomb Institute, for instance, there is a circular economy initiative. So lots of things are changing. There will be major economic opportunities in the next years. This is just what I wanted to show you from a higher altitude, so to speak, so that you don't only start with the national circular economy strategy, because then you'd probably wonder whether Germany is going its own maverick way. No, this is all embedded into the European Green Deal, and only if you see it in this embedded way will we get anywhere. And we, as the BDE, invested a lot of time into all our working groups for the entire year. All our working groups worked on everything to issue our own impetus to the National Circular Economy Strategy, which we made available to the federal government and the federal states, because we think that these are major players, that the circular economy strategy won't work if you don't think of Europe and the countries that have to implement it all. And this 360-degree view also includes that, in particular, the opportunities of digitization have to be addressed. I brought an image along here. This is a quantum computer in Karlsruhe, which was opened by Ms. Merkel during COVID. You could see who was there, about 150 people. Nobody was really all that interested, but you can get calculation performance that you can book as a company, and it's got capacities that you cannot even imagine with your little home calculator. And product pass issues and other things can be solved by this. So lots of things are happening in digitization. The products can be tracked from the beginning to the end. And there's also an opportunity that the CO2 backpack can also be mapped, so that you have the opportunity of getting to real prices between raw materials and recyclates. We, as a BDE, after the beginning of the Ukraine war, also focused on something else, industrial streams. We didn't call it that at first. Industrial streams, bridge streams and others, these are the terms that are being bandied about now. But when we started it, we were clear that Germany as an industrial location can only work if you have competitive prices for manufacturing. And considering all the opportunities for circular economy, this will only work if we have customers who use the recyclates. If German industry, paper, steel, others used these recyclates. If not, then circular economy wouldn't make sense. So we did this from a very early stage on. The president of the BDEs on the left-hand side, and all the parliament delegates were addressed and were made aware of this subject. And another topic, we need speed, speed, and again speed. This is difficult if you apply for an ID card in Berlin. It may take quite a while, and if you're planning an investment and are not Tesla, where things are done at top level, then it can take quite a while. And then you've got the objective that for Europe, carbon neutrality is to be reached in 2050. For Germany, it's to be 2045, and now we are already in 2023. So it doesn't require a lot of maths to know that we need a lot of speed to get the permits. Then once you've got the permits, you need to build all these sites. So the speed is one problem, and then it's the regulatory level that we also need to take into account: renewable energies, expansion of infrastructure. The legislator is speeding up things here, but the next problem is that administration also has to cooperate, because there's demographic change here too, and even if the legal situation is clear, somebody needs to work on it and accelerate the whole process. But beyond what's governmentally controlled, you also have the individual citizens, that the ones who say, not in my backyard, who often make things even more difficult. You know it from Südlink, started building in northern Germany, and it was quite clear that the dimension was too small for Germany, and it was said, well, can't we make it bigger? And it was said, no. There was this protest against earth cables, and if you were to increase the size of the earth cables, then the farmers would no longer be able to do their farming on the surface. So there are loads of conflicts here that you would run into, and a lot of headwind also when it comes to building more rail tracks that you would also need if you want to transport more people via rail. And because this is an economic trade show, I've brought along a graph from the IW Cologne, which is very interesting. It doesn't play any role in the election campaigning in Bavaria, but it shows what happens in industry. So industrial jobs in Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg are declining, and in the northern part of Germany, these jobs are being ramped up, because the energy is a lot more tangible there. There's a lot of green electricity. This was also an essential point for Tesla to go to Brandenburg. So lots of things are happening in northern Germany. I come from Bavaria. I remember the 70s when I grew up. Bavaria used not to be that rich, so we had different times back then. So as you see, times can change once again. So this entire topic of transformation and speed is important. And if you have the industrial strength, and if you want to maintain it in Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, then you should ensure that routes such as Südlink should actually be implemented as fast as possible. Another topic that has to do with the success of circular economy and transformation is that of skilled labor. That's true for the authorities, but also for us. We need professional drivers, and as BDE, we actually have a very broad plan. We advocate that we want female professional drivers, and so it does have a lot of opportunity, a lot of potential, just as using migrants and skilled labor from third countries. So professional driver visas have already been introduced, or has thought about thinking of introducing these, but it's not that easy to do it. But if you look at these strategies, you have to really dive into the details. And I just brought along an example, the driving license guideline of the EU, for instance. It means that if you want to pass your driving license in the EU as an EU citizen, you can only do it in Germany if you have your residence here. You wouldn't be allowed, or you could also do it in Italy or in other countries, but it wouldn't be recognized. So you have a major problem. And for us, it would be a major opportunity, because if we had skilled labor from a third country, then they will probably not speak German, but another language that's spoken in Europe. So this multitude of languages is also a major opportunity. But at the moment, the legal situation is adverse. The ADAC, after the reviewed driving license guideline, has achieved that everybody can do their driving license anywhere in Europe, but they trusted too much in the European legislator. It's not quite like that yet. But this is just an example of what happens also when you think about skilled labor and looking at things in detail, which screws have to be turned.
And another topic in terms of circular economy is enforcement, implementation, execution. We already have problems there because there's a lack of personnel in authorities. So it is not ideal in terms of enforcement, what we find in Germany here. So just one example, the commercial waste ordinance and the commercial bin for residual waste and for organic waste. And especially for the organic waste bin, it's true that the circular economy legislation applies to Germany overall. And not everyone, of course, has a compost system at home. But in Thuringia, for instance, only 33 kilograms per inhabitant are collected. However, there are also some other states in Germany where you have 100 kilograms per inhabitant. So you can see that this is an enforcement topic. Also, how you organize the collection system, what is the waste disposal and collection system. There are different systems per federal state. Sometimes you actually have to take your organic waste to a depot yourself, and not the most inhabitants are doing that. So with the commercial waste ordinance, it is also true that there is a lack of enforcement. So the private households have to, of course, separate their waste. And for commercial companies, it's also true that this needs to be done since 2017. However, there is a lack of enforcement in several federal states. And of course, we also lose a lot of potential because there are a lot of recyclable materials in the residual bin, especially for commercial waste. So first, it's about the identification of recyclable materials, but also based on the expertise of the recycling companies and waste disposal companies, we also have to transfer them back into the cycle. So it would be good to have a European-wide regulation which makes clear as of when waste is no longer waste, but a recycled material. If you build a house, for instance, it will make a difference whether it's labeled as waste or whether it's labeled as a product which you can use here in your garden in order to build something new. So it's not just a legal question. It's also a question how it's perceived by the end user and the customer. And another point which was also included in the coalition agreement of the federal government are the so-called real laboratories. You have to try and test new things. You have to be courageous and open up opportunities. Hamburg is doing a great job there. They have a model region logistics and they try and test a lot of things there. Real laboratories, it sounds really nice. However, it also means that at the end of the legislation, this could also mean that things change completely. So for the members of the authorities, the officers and the legal experts, it also means that they don't know what the future holds. So things are being tried and tested, but things will also turn out differently. I think reality laboratories are a good thing. This will also be an opportunity for the circular economy. And of course, we also have to rethink the last mile and pooling. Of course, this also brings us to antitrust legislation. So many legal aspects are connected to that if you want to change your mindset. But I believe that the future will not look the same. It won't be the past, the continuation of the past. For instance, over here, the Rheintalstrecke, the German railway system has been building that track for quite some time. And of course, you can ship much more materials using that track. So you also have to consider logistics here. And we at BDE, we also said in terms of the national circular economy strategy, it's also about waste prevention. This is a topic that we shouldn't forget, and we stand behind waste prevention. People might say, oh, the BDE, they're responsible for waste disposal and waste collection. They want waste to occur. However, that's not true. And it's really a highly interesting topic. This is also shown by this slide. You can see what Germany has already achieved in terms of recycling and the circular economy. So at the beginning of 2000, we were able to decouple the GDP development, which is the blue line, from the waste development. So this is a clear message here. Germany and all the Germans have already achieved a lot, and this is a positive story. But I agree with Professor Faustich. We cannot just lean back and relax. The substitution rate of 10% is too low. But there are also economic incentives. So at the trade show, I also wanted to show you this. So in the automotive industry, BMW, VW, Daimler, they already realized in the year 2000 that if they prevent waste, they will also reduce their costs, and they will be able to make their entire supply chain more efficient. Material also costs a lot of money, and waste can also be used as valuable material, and then you also need fewer interfaces. So the automotive industry can also tell you very positive stories. In 2011, we started a campaign at BDE saying Germany will become a raw materials country. We don't have a lot of raw materials. However, we said, no, that's not true. We have secondary raw materials. Germany will become a raw materials country. And with these raw materials, we can actually build or construct a car. And then we had this campaign, we make a passenger car of 25,000 yogurt caps, and people were laughing about that. However, BMW actually presented such a recycling car, which consists of recycled materials. So it's highly interesting. We presented it already in 2011, and then BMW actually showed that it is possible in 2023. Also, Apple, they were fighting the USB cable. They said they wanted to have their lightning cable. And last week, there was a press conference for 1.5 hours, and I watched it. And they always used the term recycling. Recycling Apple Watches, recycled components and accessories. So Apple is actually doing a lot in this field, and they won't be alone. Others also want to become climate neutral. So this is just some insight or some idea for you. The circular economy is important for our future. Over here you can see some press releases from last year. So the headline says, "The world is not enough." And for an economic trade show, this is very promising. So I want to leave on this positive note, with this positive message.